In August 1944, a Hawker Typhoon limped back from a ground attack mission over occupied France. Its massive Napier Sabre engine trailing smoke after taking devastating flak damage during a low-level strike against a German panzer column. The pilot, attempting to reach England across the Channel, misjudged his fuel consumption and force-landed in a field near Calais. Within a week, the aircraft, a fighter bomber that German troops on the receiving end of its rockets called the Butcher, and that Luftwaffe pilots grudgingly respected as untouchable below 10,000 feet, was sitting at Recklinghausen, where German test pilots would discover that British engineers had built a fighter optimized for the one-altitude regime where the air war was being decided, ground level. What they found would challenge every assumption about high-altitude performance being paramount, revealed that the Typhoon could dive at 500 miles per hour with complete stability, and confirmed that British design philosophy had shifted from elegant dogfighters to brutal ground attack specialists who owned the low-altitude battlespace completely. This is the story of how test data proved that altitude supremacy meant nothing when the real war was being fought at treetop level, and how honest reports traveled through a command structure that was too focused on bomber interception to understand that tactical air superiority was being lost on a different battlefield entirely. Subscribe now if you want the untold stories of World War II's engineering battles, the test flights that revealed uncomfortable truths about tactical aviation, the reports that documented Germany's losing position, and the human cost when bureaucracies ignored data. We go deeper than anyone else. Hit subscribe. August 17, 1944. Recklinghausen Airfield, Mecklenburg, Germany. The morning is warm, late summer settled over northern Germany with temperatures climbing toward uncomfortable heat. The sky pale blue with scattered clouds, wind barely moving across the airfield. Oberstleutnant Hans-Werner Lurch stands on the concrete apron, hands on his hips, studying the aircraft before him with an expression that mixes professional interest and grudging respect. The Hawker Typhoon Mark Ib, serial number MN235, sits heavily on German soil, its thick wings and massive chin radiator giving it a pugnacious, aggressive appearance unlike the sleek fighters Lurch is accustomed to evaluating. The aircraft is painted in invasion stripes, black and white bands hastily applied before D-Day, now faded and oil-stained. The 420mm Hispano cannons protruding from the wings speak of serious offensive intent. The aircraft force-landed 9 days ago near Calais, its pilot, Flight Lieutenant James Blackwood, 23 years old, from Scotland, captured after attempting unsuccessfully to destroy his aircraft with an incendiary grenade that failed to ignite properly. German recovery crews found the aircraft largely intact, transported it by rail through Belgium and into Germany, and now it waits at Recklinghausen, ready to reveal what makes it so effective at the one job that matters most in August 1944, killing German soldiers and tanks at ground level. Lurch is 31 years old, one of the Luftwaffe's most experienced test pilots with over 2,200 hours and more than 80 different aircraft types. He has flown every major Allied fighter that has fallen into German hands: Spitfires, Mustangs, Lightnings, Thunderbolts, even a Russian Yak-9 for 20 minutes before its engine seized. Each evaluation has been a lesson in Allied engineering philosophy, in how different nations solve the same problems with radically different approaches. But the Typhoon is unique. Intelligence reports describe it as a low-altitude specialist optimized for ground attack rather than air superiority, dangerous below 15,000 feet but mediocre above it. German pilots encountering Typhoons over France report an aircraft that is wickedly fast at low altitude, that can dive like a stone, that carries devastating armament but handles like a truck. Luftwaffe fighter units are instructed to avoid Typhoons at low altitude, to engage only with altitude advantage, to treat them as heavily armed fighter bombers rather than dogfighters. But ground troops tell different stories. They speak with fear of Typhoon attacks, of rockets that destroy tanks, of cannon fire that shreds everything, of an aircraft that appears at rooftop height moving impossibly fast, attacks with brutal precision, and disappears before anti-aircraft guns can respond. Lurch is here to understand this aircraft, to measure its capabilities, to determine whether it represents a genuine threat to Luftwaffe operations, or whether it is simply a specialized tool for a specific mission profile. Behind Lurch, 3 other pilots wait in the August heat. Major Heinz Bauer, 24 years old, now with 203 confirmed victories, recently returned from the Eastern Front to help defend against the Allied invasion. Hauptmann Wolfgang Spate, 26 years old, a dive testing specialist who has pushed every captured Allied fighter to its structural limits. And Lieutenant Rudolf Opitz, 23 years old, an engineer pilot from Messerschmitt assigned to document technical characteristics. Each man has specific test assignments. Lurch will conduct initial evaluation, assessing handling and general performance. Bauer will conduct low-altitude tactical testing, simulating the ground attack missions the Typhoon was designed for. Space will conduct high-speed dive testing, determining maximum safe dive speed and structural limits. Opets will conduct instrumented testing, documenting engine performance, control forces, and aerodynamic characteristics. Together, they will answer the question, is the Hawker Typhoon a significant threat, or is it a one-trick aircraft that German fighters can counter once its limitations are understood? The Typhoon has been made airworthy over 8 days of intensive work by Recklin's ground crews, assisted by Napier engine specialists from the German aviation industry who have studied, captured Sabre engines with fascination and frustration. The damage from the forced landing was moderate: bent propeller, damaged landing gear, ruptured coolant lines, bent airframe structure requiring straightening. German mechanics fabricated a replacement propeller using measurements from the damaged one. Though achieving the correct blade twist and profile was difficult, the landing gear was repaired using improvised parts. The Typhoon's landing gear is unique, heavily reinforced for rough field operations. The coolant system was patched and refilled with a glycol mixture that approximates British specifications. The most challenging aspect was the engine itself, the Napier Sabre II, a 24-cylinder H-block engine that is unlike anything in German service. The configuration uses 4 banks of 6 cylinders arranged in an H pattern, liquid-cooled, producing 2,180 horsepower. German engines, the DB 605, the BMW 801 produce 1,475 and 1,700 horsepower respectively. The Sabre produces 50% more power than the best German fighter engine, but the Sabre is notoriously temperamental, prone to overheating, requiring careful management. The captured engine sustained minor damage from the flak hit cracked coolant manifold, damaged sleeve valves in 2 cylinders. German engineers repaired what they could, fabricated what they could not repair. The result is functional but uncertain. The engine runs, produces power, but whether it will survive extended operation at high power settings is unknown. Lurch walks slowly around the Typhoon, examining every detail. The aircraft is large, not as heavy as the P-47 Thunderbolt, but substantially larger than a Spitfire or Bf-109. The wingspan is 41 feet, comparable to German fighters, but the fuselage is thick, deep, designed to accommodate the massive Sabre engine and its cooling systems. The wings are thick, almost bulky, giving the aircraft a solid, workmanlike appearance rather than the elegant lines of a Spitfire. The chin radiator is enormous, a massive scoop under the nose housing coolant radiators, oil coolers, and intake ducting. The radiator gives the aircraft its distinctive appearance, aggressive and pugnacious. The tail is large, with substantial vertical and horizontal surfaces providing stability. The overall impression is of an aircraft designed for function over form, for effectiveness over elegance. The 4 Hispano Mk 220mm cannons are mounted in the wings, 2 per wing, with the barrels protruding aggressively. The ammunition capacity is 140 rounds per gun, totaling 560 rounds. Each round weighs 130 grams, meaning the Typhoon carries 73 kilograms of explosive projectiles. The rate of fire is 650 rounds per minute per gun, providing devastating firepower, 2,600 rounds per minute combined. A 2-second burst delivers 87 rounds of 20mm high explosive shells. Nothing survives that. The Typhoon can also carry 8 60-pound RP-3 rockets under the wings, or 2 1,000-pound bombs, or 2 500-pound bombs. This captured example was configured for ground attack, with rocket rails still attached, scorched from recent firing. The cockpit sits high, providing good visibility, though not as good as a bubble canopy fighter. The canopy is framed with a car door-style entry on the left side. The Typhoon has a hinged door rather than a sliding canopy, unusual for a fighter but reflecting its ground attack role where ease of entry and exit is prioritized. Lurch opens the door, climbs into the cockpit. The seat is comfortable, well padded, with armor protection behind and below. The instrument panel is logically organized but crowded, reflecting the complexity of managing the Sabre engine. Airspeed indicator, altimeter, turn and bank, artificial horizon, directional gyro, all standard instruments, but the engine instruments are extensive. Manifold pressure, RPM, fuel pressure, oil temperature, coolant temperature for front and rear cylinder banks separately, radiator flap position indicator. Monitoring the Sabre requires constant attention to temperatures. The engine runs hot, very hot, and overheating causes rapid catastrophic failure. The throttle quadrant features multiple controls: throttle, propeller pitch, mixture, radiator flap override. The complexity is comparable to American fighters, far more complex than German fighters, which automate most engine management. A German mechanic, Obergefreiter Klaus Hartmann, 29 years old, climbs up to provide the cockpit briefing. Hartmann worked at Napier as an exchange engineer before the war, one of the few Germans with first-hand knowledge of the Sabre engine. He has studied this particular Typhoon obsessively, trying to coax maximum performance from the repaired engine. He explains the startup procedure: fuel on, coolant pumps on, oil pressure check, mixture rich, propeller full fine, throttle set 1 inch forward, magnetos to both, engage starter. The Sabre requires careful priming. Too much floods the engine, too little causes backfiring. He warns that the Sabre is sensitive to throttle position, that rapid throttle movements can cause backfires or detonation. He warns that coolant temperature must be monitored constantly, that the Sabre overheats rapidly at high power, that exceeding 135 degrees Celsius coolant temperature will cause head gasket failure within minutes. He warns that the radiator flap must be managed carefully, balancing cooling against drag. Automatic mode works adequately, but manual control provides better performance. Hartmann's warnings are serious, detailed. The Sabre is powerful but demanding. It requires skill to manage, constant vigilance to keep operating safely. Lurch nods, commits everything to memory, signals Hartmann to climb down. He straps in using the British Sutton harness, adjusts the seat, tests the control column. The Typhoon uses a stick rather than a wheel, conventional for a fighter. The stick feels heavy, solid, requiring force to move even on the ground. The control forces are reputed to be very heavy, comparable to the P-47, requiring significant physical strength at high speeds. He locates the gun sight, a simple Mk2 reflector sight, adequate but not sophisticated. He runs through the startup checklist, then signals the ground crew. An external battery cart provides starting power. Fuel on. Coolant pumps on. He can hear the electric pumps humming. Mixture rich, propeller full fine. Throttle 1 inch forward, magnetos to both. He engages the starter. The Sabre cranks slowly, the massive 4-bladed rotor propeller rotating through compression. Once, twice, 3 times. Then the engine catches with a sound unlike anything Lurch has heard. The 24 cylinders fire in a complex sequence, creating a deep, burbling roar that is part howl, part mechanical scream. The exhaust stubs eject flame and noise, 12 exhaust ports per side, creating a wall of sound. The Sabre does not purr like a Merlin or roar like a Radial. It screams, a high-pitched mechanical wail that speaks of tremendous power barely contained. The propeller spins up, the cockpit fills with vibration, and Lurch feels the aircraft come alive. He monitors the gauges as the Sabre warms. Oil pressure climbs to 75 psi, normal. Coolant temperatures rise slowly, front bank 65 degrees Celsius, rear bank 70 degrees. The rear bank always runs hotter. Manifold pressure shows 30 inches. Idle power. The engine settles into a rough idle at 1,000 RPM, vibrating noticeably. Eager. He tests the magnetos, switching from both to left, checking for RPM drop. Acceptable drop, 50 RPM. Right magneto, same. Back to both. He cycles the propeller pitch, watching the RPM change. The constant speed unit responds smoothly. He tests the radiator flap, switching from automatic to manual, opening and closing it. Watching coolant temperature respond. The system works. He tests the flight controls, moving the stick and rudder through full travel. The ailerons are extremely heavy, requiring significant force. The elevator is lighter but still heavy. The rudder is heavy. Everything about the Typhoon requires strength. He is ready to taxi. He releases the brakes and advances the throttle. The Typhoon rolls forward heavy, solid, the tail wheel providing directional control. He sterns toward the taxiway, looking around the nose. Forward visibility is poor, the engine and long nose blocking the view, but better than a P-47. The brakes are powerful, hydraulically boosted, providing precise control. He reaches the runway threshold, turns into the wind, runs through pre-takeoff checks. Mixture rich, propeller full fine. Radiator flap automatic, fuel selector main tank, magnetos both. Coolant temperatures checked, front 95 degrees, rear 105 degrees, both within limits for takeoff. He advances the throttle to full power. The Sabre howls, the propeller claws the air, and the Typhoon accelerates rapidly down the runway. The acceleration is impressive, less violent than the P-47 but faster than a Bf-109. The torque is significant, requiring right rudder but manageable. At 80 miles per hour the tail lifts. At 110 miles per hour he eases back on the stick and the Typhoon lifts off, climbing away with authority. He retracts the landing gear, watching the wheels fold up into the wings. He retracts the flaps. The Typhoon uses flaps for takeoff, unusual for German fighters. The aircraft accelerates rapidly. He reduces power to climb setting, 2,850 RPM and +7 boost, and the Typhoon climbs at 2,900 feet per minute. The Bf-109G6 climbs at 3,100 feet per minute. The Typhoon is marginally slower, but only marginally despite being heavier and optimized for low altitude. He levels at 5,000 feet and begins basic handling tests. Turns left, turns right, steep banks at 60 degrees. The Typhoon responds smoothly but very heavily. The control forces are enormous, among the heaviest Lurch has experienced. The ailerons require significant force to initiate rolls. The roll rate is poor, perhaps 55 degrees per second at 250 miles per hour. The turn rate is adequate but not exceptional. In a pure turning fight, a Bf-109 would dominate. But Lurch realizes the Typhoon is not designed for turning fights. It is designed for speed at low altitude, for diving attacks, for boom and zoom tactics. He needs to test what it does well. He descends to 1,000 feet, leveling just above the trees, and advances the throttle to military power plus 11 boost and 3,000 RPM. The Sabre howls. The Typhoon accelerates with startling rapidity. 250 miles per hour. 350, 380, 400. The airspeed stabilizes at 405 miles per hour at 1,000 feet. The aircraft is rock-solid, stable, the controls remaining responsive despite the speed. Lurch has never flown this fast at this altitude. The Bf-109 G6's maximum speed at sea level is 320 miles per hour. The Typhoon is flying 85 miles per hour faster. This is not marginal advantage. This is categorical superiority in the low-altitude regime. At these speeds, at this altitude, nothing German can catch the Typhoon. He climbs to 5,000 feet and repeats the test. 410 miles per hour. He climbs to 10,000 feet, 415 miles per hour. The Typhoon is fastest at low altitude, performance declining gradually as altitude increases. This is the opposite of German fighters, which achieve best performance at 18,000 to 20,000 feet. The Typhoon is optimized for a different war, a war fought at ground level against troops and tanks rather than at high altitude against bombers. But the real test is the dive. Combat reports speak with awe of the Typhoon's dive performance. German pilots encountering Typhoons describe them diving away at speeds that seem impossible, disappearing toward the ground in vertical dives that German fighters dare not follow. Lurch needs to test this. He needs to know if an aircraft this heavy, this thick-winged, can really dive at 500 miles per hour as reports claim. He climbs to 20,000 feet, his test altitude for dive evaluation. At 20,000 feet, he stabilizes, checks his harness tight, secure. The altimeter reads 20,000 feet. The sky above is clear blue. He rolls the Typhoon inverted, a slow, heavy roll requiring significant force, then pulls the stick back, pulling through into a vertical dive. The Typhoon's nose drops toward the earth, the aircraft entering the dive smoothly, stabilizing in a perfect vertical descent. The airspeed begins building rapidly, 250 miles per hour, 300, 350. The dive is completely stable, no vibration, no buffeting. 400, 450. The control forces increase dramatically, but the aircraft remains perfectly controllable. 480, 500. The indicated airspeed reaches 500 miles per hour and stabilizes. The Typhoon is screaming toward the earth in a vertical dive at 500 miles per hour, and the aircraft is rock-solid stable. No flutter, no buffeting, no tendency to tuck under or pull out. The thick wings, which seem like a disadvantage for high-altitude performance, provide exceptional stability at high speed. The structure, massively reinforced after early production Typhoons experienced tail failures, is absorbing forces without strain. Lurch maintains the dive, experiencing 500 miles per hour, the ground rushing up with terrifying speed. At 5,000 feet, he begins recovery, pulling back on the stick with both hands using all his strength. The stick is immovably heavy, the control force is enormous, but the elevator bites, the nose begins to rise. G-forces crush him into the seat, his vision graying, 7G or more. But the Typhoon pulls out smoothly at 2,000 feet, leveling just above the trees. He has lost 18,000 feet in the dive. The airframe's undamaged, the wings show no deformation. The Typhoon just survived a 500 mile per hour dive without complaint. The Bf-109 is unsafe above 470 miles per hour. The FW-190A is cleared to 550 but experiences severe buffeting above 500. The Typhoon at 500 miles per hour is smooth, stable, controllable. This dive performance, combined with low-altitude speed, makes the Typhoon nearly untouchable in its intended operating regime. A Typhoon pilot attacking ground targets can dive from altitude, accelerate to 500 miles per hour, attack at 400 miles per hour at ground level, and escape before German fighters can react. German pilots cannot catch it. German anti-aircraft guns cannot track it. The Typhoon owns the low-altitude battle space. After 90 minutes of flight, Lurch returns to Rechlin. The landing is straightforward, the Typhoon touching down heavily at 110 miles per hour. The reinforced landing gear absorbing the impact. He taxis back, shuts down. The Sabre coolant temperatures are 128 degrees front, 134 degrees rear, dangerously close to the 135-degree limit. The engine survived, but barely. He sits in the cockpit processing what he just experienced. The Typhoon is optimized for low altitude, fastest below 10,000 feet, slower at high altitude, but at low altitude it is untouchable. And the dive performance is exceptional, equal to the P-47, better than any German fighter. The implications are disturbing. The air war is not just about bomber interception at 25,000 feet. There's another war at ground level, tactical air support, and the Typhoon dominates that war completely. Einsbar flies next, conducting low-altitude tactical testing. He flies the Typhoon at 500 feet, simulating ground attack runs, discovering that the aircraft is incredibly stable at high speed and low altitude. The thick wings resist turbulence. The heavy controls require strength but provide precise control. He performs simulated rocket attacks, discovering that the aircraft's stability makes it an ideal weapons platform. He performs simulated strafing runs with the 420mm cannons, discovering that the concentrated firepower is devastating. He lands and his assessment is blunt. This aircraft is purpose-built for killing ground targets. It does not dogfight. It does not intercept bombers. It kills tanks and trucks and trains. And at its mission, it is perfect. We have nothing that can do this job as well. Our ground attack aircraft, the FW-190F, the Ju-87 are slower, more vulnerable. The Typhoon attacks at 400 miles per hour. By the time we react, it is gone. Wolfgang Spate conducts extended dive testing, pushing the Typhoon to 520 miles per hour in a dive from 25,000 feet. The aircraft remains stable, controllable. He conducts repeated dives, testing different configurations, discovering that the Typhoon's dive performance is not accidental. It is designed and engineered deliberately. The thick wings provide stability. The heavy structure absorbs loads. The result is an aircraft that can dive faster than almost anything else and pull out safely every time. His report states, the Typhoon's dive performance is exceptional. It matches the P-47 despite being lighter. The thick wing section provides stability at high speed that thin wing fighters lack. This is not elegant engineering. This is brute force effectiveness. Rudolf Opitz conducts instrumented testing, documenting that the Napier Sabre produces 2,180 horsepower at low altitude, declining to approximately 1,850 horsepower at 20,000 feet. The power curve is opposite to German engines, which peak at medium altitude. The Typhoon is optimized for low altitude power where ground attack occurs. He documents control forces, discovering that aileron forces at 400 miles per hour exceed 50 pounds, among the highest of any fighter. The Typhoon requires physical strength to fly aggressively. He documents fuel consumption, discovering that the Sabre burns approximately 150 gallons per hour at combat power, giving the Typhoon endurance of about 90 minutes. Range is limited compared to the P-51 or P-38, but adequate for tactical missions. The Typhoon is not a strategic fighter. It is a tactical weapon, designed for short-range, high-intensity missions against ground targets. August 19, 1944. The four pilots compiled their findings into a report, 47 pages, documenting tests and conclusions. The summary states, the Hawker Typhoon represents British design philosophy optimized for tactical ground attack. The aircraft is fastest at low altitude, achieving 405 miles per hour at sea level. 85 miles per hour faster than the Bf-109 G6. Dive performance is exceptional, with safe dive speeds exceeding 500 miles per hour. The combination of low-altitude speed and dive performance makes the Typhoon nearly untouchable in its operating regime. The aircraft is heavily armed with 420mm cannons and can carry substantial bomb or rocket loads. The Napier Sabre engine produces 2,180 horsepower at low altitude, 50% more than German fighter engines. The aircraft is optimized for a mission-tactical ground attack, where it has no German equivalent. The FW-190F ground attack variant is slower, more vulnerable. The Typhoon represents a threat not to German bomber interception capability, but to German ground forces, which are increasingly vulnerable to Allied tactical air power that German fighters cannot effectively counter. The report is delivered to Milk on August 21st. Milk reads it, recognizes its significance, forwards it with a recommendation that Germany develop a dedicated low-altitude ground attack fighter with performance comparable to the Typhoon. Ring's response is dismissive. Germany needs fighters to stop American bombers at high altitude, not ground attack aircraft. The FW-190F is adequate for ground attack. The report is filed, but the knowledge spreads among combat units. Pilots learn that the Typhoon is not just a specialized ground attack aircraft, it is untouchable at low altitude. Orders are issued, do not engage Typhoons below 10,000 feet unless altitude advantage is overwhelming. The Typhoon is ceding low-altitude air superiority to the British. By September 1944, Typhoon squadrons are operating extensively over France, Belgium, and Holland, supporting the Allied advance. They attack German armor, destroy supply columns, strafe airfields. German ground troops fear them more than any other Allied aircraft. The distinctive sound of the Sabre engine becomes associated with death from above. German fighters focused on high-altitude bomber interception rarely contest Typhoon operations. The tactical air war is being lost at low altitude while German leadership focuses on strategic defense at high altitude. The captured Typhoon at Reckland continues flying through September. Additional pilots experiencing its capabilities, all confirming the original findings. In October, it is destroyed in a bombing raid. The test data survives, scattered across multiple facilities. Post-war Lurch reflects on the Typhoon evaluation in interviews. He says, "The Typhoon taught us that there are different kinds of air superiority. We focused on high-altitude interception, on stopping bombers at 25,000 feet. The British built the Typhoon for low-altitude ground attack for killing tanks and trucks. We had no answer to it. Our ground forces suffered enormously from Typhoon attacks, and our fighters could do nothing. We were fighting the wrong air war." The Typhoon proved that. The lesson that different mission requirements demand different aircraft designs. That there is no universal optimal fighter was learned too late to matter. The Typhoon served through the war's end, achieving legendary status among ground troops who it protected and German troops who faced it. Over 3,300 were built. The aircraft's combination of speed, firepower, and durability made it one of the war's most effective ground attack platforms. The dive performance, German test pilots documented 500 miles per hour safely. Repeatedly was exploited ruthlessly by British pilots who used diving attacks to achieve surprise, deliver ordnance, and escape before defenses could respond. The Typhoon's thick wings, initially criticized as draggy and old-fashioned, proved ideal for high-speed stability. British engineers had optimized for the right mission. German engineers, focused on high-altitude performance, had not. The difference was measured in destroyed German tanks, in disrupted supply columns, in tactical air superiority that enabled the Allied advance. The Typhoon evaluation proved Germans could measure and understand enemy capabilities accurately. They simply couldn't respond effectively because their priorities, their resources, and their strategic focus were elsewhere. The report documented a problem, but Germany in 1944 lacked the capacity to solve it. The Typhoon evaluation revealed how specialized design could dominate specific mission profiles, a lesson in matching aircraft to mission rather than chasing universal performance. If you want more deep-dive stories into World War II's engineering battles, subscribe now. We publish these primary source investigations every week. Thanks for watching.